discipline is not about punishing the moment. You're not, the goal is to not punish for the moment. Discipline is about creating a good functioning adult. So when you're looking at the context, it's like, what about the bigger picture is this moment not working? So I have 4 sons, and each son in each scenario is going to require a different level of force. Now, I think a lot of fathers don't think about using less force and then graduating it into more force. I think most fathers have one tool and they go, I'm going straight to this really aggressive discipline.
You're listening to the Intentional Minds podcast. This is a space where we share conversations that spark growth. I'm your host, Divine Marizu, and you're welcome. Awesome. Hey man, how's it going? Good to have you on the show. Welcome to the Intentional Minds podcast. How are you doing today?
Oh, yeah. I'm doing good, man. I'm doing real good. It's been a good mellow day so far, and pumped to be here.
Amazing. You're someone whose lifestyle and journey is inspiring, and that's because of the work you do and the way you live your life. And today's topic is all about like fatherhood and how we can raise better boys to be great men tomorrow, and how men and fathers today can be more intentional with that and do a great job at it. And you're the personification of that, I would say. So I would love us to start from like the very core of what does it mean to actually be a father, right? What does it mean to be an intentional father?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, it's a really, really big subject. And
Yeah.
I think all men have that capability of becoming a dad or becoming a father through just a very pleasurable and short act. But I think the question around what it means to be an intentional father is to just not do it, without thinking. I think for me, the core of that is to just be like, hey, what are we trying to do with fatherhood? What's the goal of this fatherhood thing? In my mind, that's to raise good adults or good human beings, and then to basically think through the process of all the stuff that we do in fatherhood, like the way we act, who we are, the outcome of every action that we take. And so, the idea is that none of us really know what we're doing. And even if you think you do know what you're doing, like when you start, you're like, wow, I was super wrong. So I guess the core of it all for intentional fatherhood is to just to be reflective and to examine what you're doing and to pay attention to the outcomes that of all the actions that you take.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. And you're the kind of father you wanted to be, I would suppose. Like, did you always know that this was the kind of father you wanted to be, or was it something that you figured out along the way? At what point? Yeah.
It's definitely something that I figured out along the way. Like I was never much of I thought I'd be a father, but I never was like, I'm going to be a dad and I'm going to be an intentional father. Like that was never it. I think what happened was, I fell into fitness when I was, relatively young, about 20 years old, and started training and doing that kind of stuff. And the style of training that I fell into is very centered around data and information and constant experimentation and examining outcomes. So when you do something, you pay attention to the results, and then that changes what you do. And that's kind of a scientific approach to life in general. So like you go, okay, I want this outcome. What am I currently doing? Is it giving me what I want? And then you examine that over and over again, and you refine the processes. It's the general process of learning. If you pay attention, like that's what you do when you learn is you try stuff and then it works or it doesn't. And you take the stuff that's good and you throw away the stuff that doesn't work. So for me, that was my thought process going into fatherhood. But I didn't realize how confronting fatherhood would be as like it's very, very hard. And there was so much, I don't know how to say this. There's so much focus on self. So like when I had my first kid, it immediately made me go like, who am I? Like, what is this? What am I doing? Like, how do I do this process? And there's a lot of struggle there. eventually I started to figure some things out. And so I would say no, I didn't know I always wanted to be this, and I didn't know that this was the process, but I kind of fell into it, and I feel very lucky for my life leading up to this point.
Yeah, incredible. Let's get to know you on a personal level right now. You create
Sure.
content around showing what it means to be an intentional father. Like,
Hmm.
what's motivated you to start that? And give us a context around who you are and sort of what you do.
Sure. This is kind of just a hobby for me. I have a very sorted relationship with social media. I think social media does far more bad than it does good, and I would take very long periods of time away from social media because I hated most of it
Yeah,
that was on there. So much of it is polarizing and hatred and just like perpetuating, paying attention to what you look like over who you are, and like it was just a negative hole for me,
yeah,
and while simultaneously being really addictive. So I've always struggled with the place that social media has in my life and whether or not I wanted to put stuff out there because
yeah,
it felt to me like every time I put stuff on the internet, the stuff that I really liked, nobody cared about. And I was like, cool, whatever, like that's okay. But it
yeah, yeah,
also, like, I was trying to do things that I thought were cool or like that
yeah,
I enjoyed, and nobody ever enjoyed that.
yeah.
So I actually ended up taking a few years off of social media and continuing to kind of fester in my own ideas of what I didn't like about it. And then one day I was sitting around and I was like, you know what? I could either keep complaining about what social media is, or I could put out stuff that I believed in and
Mm,
not really care. It would just be for me. It was like, I'm just going to put out my thoughts on fatherhood. And this would be something that I can like use as kind of a personal forward facing journal that, years later, my sons could come back and look at and they could be like, okay, what were dad's thoughts on fatherhood? And
yeah.
it was more of like my own
Experiment in
my
a
own
way.
thought process. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I wanted to put it forward facing because like I don't feel particularly vulnerable about these things. I think I'm open to conversation. I'm open to being wrong. I'm open to having my ideas challenged. I think that's the best
yeah.
way to grow. So I started this account, the Fathers Guild, and
What year was
started
this? What year
about
was
2 years
this?
ago.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So it was about 2 years ago.
Great.
It was just before Christmas in 2023,
Okay.
2020, yeah, 2023. So a year and a half ago, I guess I would say, not
Okay.
even 2 years ago.
Wow.
Um,
Incredible.
and I started posting some videos that were just like my thoughts on fatherhood. And one of them, after I was like 20 posts or 10, 15 posts in, one of them went really viral. There was a conversation around my wife had told me that my all three of my sons who could speak had independently mentioned that um, they were something about my yelling was scaring them. And I'm not much of a yeller, but I didn't think that they even viewed me as a yeller because
Yeah.
I don't yell that often. I'm pretty easygoing. So I had my camera gear out and I was filming some other stuff for my work. And I was like, I'm going to interview them each individually and ask them if they could change one thing about me, what would that thing be? And they didn't get to hear each other's answers. And I brought them in and I filmed each one of them. I was like, if you could change one thing about me, what would it be?
What did
And each of the three kids said the yelling, the yelling, the yelling, and that video was like I was like okay, and so afterwards I was like I get that. So I'm going to try a challenge where I'm not going to yell for a month. And if I do yell, I have to immediately pay the kid $5 in the moment. I have to see
Wow.
if there's other tools that I can use to have boundaries and to create discipline and to create good kids without the tool of yelling. Um, so I just wanted to try that as like a personal challenge to myself. And I
Yeah.
posted that video and it went really viral. And it was very interesting to see the range of reactions, like how much some people thought it was the worst idea ever and I was a horrible person for considering not yelling, and then on the other side of things, how much like they thought that because I yelled one time my kids are going to be broken and grow up fragile and like weak and
Extreme
hurt, and I'm like,
ends. Yeah.
dude, I was like, what is going on? It it was fascinating to
Yeah.
see both ends of the spectrum thinking I'm an idiot. And I loved that. I was like, you guys who are extremists on both sides, you
Yeah.
guys both think I'm wrong. That means to me that I'm doing something right, like,
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
I posted that, and that took my account from like 300 followers to like 40,000 almost overnight. It was like
Wow.
3 or 4 days, and
Incredible.
people and I think what had happened was the content I was posting
Yeah.
was good, and it was very focused on this concept of fatherhood and
Yeah.
considering fatherhood, but it wasn't being seen because I wasn't a larger channel. And then that one video got a lot of people to see, and when they came and looked at my other stuff, they're like, oh, this is all of the same vein. And I think it's a concept that people want to talk about and want to think about, and
Yeah.
we all don't really know what we're doing. So I just continued posting from there and continued my thoughts and continued my reflections, and it's grown to what it is now,
Yeah.
which is kind of wild to me. Like in
Yeah.
year and a half, like it's like 187,000 followers or something. I'm like,
That's
whoa,
incredible.
weird, super wild to
Yeah.
me.
What would you say that
I,
has taught you? Like that exponential
uh,
growth in a short amount of time when you reflect on it, and considering that this was just supposed to be you documenting your process of being a father essentially.
yeah, I think it's shown to me that there's a lot of people who are thinking about fatherhood and who
Yeah.
are wanting to figure out what this process is. Like,
Yeah.
I don't always have my posts go where I want them to in terms of
Yeah.
being seen and stuff. Like, and in fact, there's a certain well, I guess what it's also taught me is that there's a certain need to, if you want your information to be seen, you kind of have to play the game. And the social media game is the fact that, like, no matter how good your post is, the due to the medium, like the fact that you're posting on social media, you're posting on Instagram, there needs to be a style of editing and a style of visuals and things like that that draw people's attention so
Hmm.
that they don't swipe past it. So part of what it taught me was, like, I need to edit in a certain way and I need to post in a certain way that makes people stick for just a second so they can listen to what I'm saying. And I think it sucks that that's the case. I would love it if people just had a longer attention span,
Yeah.
but I can't complain about it because that's what it is. That's just the
Reality.
nature of social media. So I can put meaning into the post, but I do
Yeah.
have to realize that I need to edit it in a certain way in order for it to be heard. Um, I think that was kind of interesting. Like, even, recently I posted a video that I thought had really good content, and it went nowhere. And so then I was like, huh. And I like pulled it down, and I took just B-roll of me chopping up stuff with a chainsaw and talking to my
Hmm.
kids and stuff. And I did B-roll over the exact same audio, put it back up, and immediately it was like, 30,000 views. And I'm like,
Wow.
okay, well, from 2,000 to 30,000 just because the visuals were slightly different. It's like,
Hmm.
that
Interesting.
sucks. The content's the
Yeah.
same. So I think it also taught me that there is a game to social media, and if you're unwilling to play the game, then don't be mad that you're not going anywhere.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a whole lot to talk about because when it comes to technology, like we're going to dive way into that. But still on this topic of
Sure.
fatherhood, there's a growing crisis of fatherlessness in society today. And there are a lot of reasons why it could be, but you're having a growing number of, say, women these days. I don't know if you saw this post, but there was this lady who put out this video a while back, and she said that she looks forward to the time when she and her friends, that is her girls, would not need a father at home. They can just raise kids and live together. And I would like to
Mm.
believe that there's a danger to that, raising kids without a father. Why do you think
Yeah.
fathers are so important in raising a kid? Raising kids, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a hard one because the main things we have to fall back on are personal experience, and then for a lot of us, it's like history and biblical text, right? So people who are talking about the Bible or faith, or the current understanding of what a father is. I also would like to believe that that's the case. Is like, fathers are vastly important, and if you look at the
Yeah.
data supporting fatherless people who grow up without fathers, even if they grow up in a good household without fathers, there's
Yeah.
still underlying things that are less stable. Um, I I I I, I want to believe that the influence of the father um, basically brings something to any relationship that is not possible to get from just a mother. And I think that the balance of two people coming together with vastly different perspectives and in addition to that, like ways of being, and for if you want to go kind of hippie with it, energies, there's different
Yeah.
energies that men bring to women bring. They help just create a more well-rounded individual when it comes to a child. So I think it's also one of those things where if you don't have a father in the household, you're not giving an example of what love looks like. You're not giving an example of what, amicable living looks like. You're not giving an example of what conflict to resolution looks like. And, there's lots of arguments against all that, saying that
Yeah.
there's a lot of households that are pretty terrible. And there's a father there and a mother there, and they're still not being shown what looks like. And they're still not being shown what conflict resolution looks like because these humans haven't worked on themselves. But I would say that it's like, I don't know. I think there's like a hierarchy of what would be ideal. And in my mind, an ideal household would
Yeah.
be a father and a mother who love each other and express love well and communicate well and bring very different strengths and weaknesses to the table, that are constantly working on themselves as well as their relationship, as well as, involving their time in their kids. And that balance of all of that would be something that is produces a more stable next generation. Now, I would say a tier down from that would be one parent who exists and can just absolutely do an amazing job
Yeah.
of providing stability and love and care and showing resilience and teaching all this other stuff. And then beneath that would be two parents who don't work well together,
Yeah.
because they're and who are not doing a great job. I mean, I think that's still below a single parent who does a really great job. i'm still gonna I'm still gonna place a mom dad who are
Yeah.
doing a great job together over a single parent who does a great job. Just I think there's something like we can't ignore the balance required for raising children. I
Yeah.
also think on
Absolutely.
your own, that's so hard. Like it's so hard on your own. Like
Absolutely.
no
Absolutely.
matter no matter how
Absolutely.
capable you are, man or woman, you're like doing
Sure.
children on your own is insanely difficult. So I don't know.
Absolutely.
Like I
Absolutely.
don't have. It sounds like
Yeah.
the woman who maybe made that post had some pretty bad experiences with men. And I can understand maybe the desire to pull away and just raise your kid with your friends, but there is something inherent to what a man can bring to a relationship, a good man
Yeah.
specifically, that can elevate existence in a way for the child that I don't think you can otherwise. And I
Yeah.
think that if kids grow up without the love of a father, and the love of a mother, but I'm speaking specifically as the love of a father, then I
Yeah.
think they're missing something. They're going to forever be searching for that hole to be
That's
filled.
absolutely. I'm a medical student, and when we study the human body, it takes two, a man and a woman, to make a child, right? So if it
Yeah.
takes two beings to come together to make a child, why do you think only one should raise that child? Like biologically
Yeah.
speaking, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of
Yeah.
the day, there's just something about that wholeness of having that nuclear family, a good man, a good woman coming together to raise kids. It just impacts their life in so many ways. And speaking of impacts on like young people and kids specifically, you come to find out that there's a growing concern about like the state of young people today, especially boys, right? Because we see so many who are struggling with stuff like laziness, depression, addiction, like lack of direction generally. And in your experience, right, what do you think is missing in the way we raise boys today? Why do we have such young people like this?
Yeah. I don't think it's any one thing. I think
Yeah,
there's a conglomeration of many, many different things.
yeah,
I think if I were to point to the many different things, I would say, for one, there's not a lot of great examples of what it means to be a great man.
Yeah.
So when we see men who work really hard, but we also see men who love really well and who work on their shit and who are also vulnerable but also strong and like
Yeah.
put ourselves out there. There's not a ton of those examples who are promoted,
Hmm.
especially in the like young kid realm. But that role should be your father, right? And there's a lot of men who like they didn't have good examples, so they're working on their own stuff. So I think part of it is just a lack of example.
Yeah.
I think the other part of it is there's right now, in order to raise a good kid, you have to put a lot of effort into it. But there's tools that you could use that would
Okay.
make it so your life is easier, but the kid's life is not as easy. And that would
Hmm.
be things like cell phones and tablets and computers. I think we're in a generation of people who couldn't raise their kids or didn't feel like it was necessary. And as soon as things got tough, they handed them a device and they were like, entertain yourself. And I don't think that you grow up if you're never given the freedom to be bored and to figure out
Hmm.
play and to fall out of trees and to, play sport. And I think right now there's a lot of people who came up in a technology generation who are expecting things to be instant and expecting things to be easy because that's what phones are. That's what devices are. So, coupled with not being having good examples of what it looks like to do these things, I think we're in a generation of
Yeah.
kids who've been sedentary. They don't understand food, which affects everything. They don't understand sleep. They're overstimulated
Yeah.
and like under physically worked. So they have all these like physical things that they would love to get out, but instead they sit and play video games because it stimulates the same dopamine part of their brain. But then they end up being sick and psychologically unstable and in many ways just like not doing well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Okay.
I think food,
It's
I think environment, I think examples, I think just a lack
technology.
of
Yeah.
yeah parenting. I think an overuse of simple, easy tools, and yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's a
Yeah.
lot.
True. Like it's a conglomerate of things. And speaking of
Yeah.
example, did you have that example? And who was that example for you if you did?
Uh, I think my example of manhood and fatherhood was like you can get a lot of examples in your life. There's
Okay.
men that you see as mentors as you go through, whether they be older kids or teachers. But I mean, of course, my primary example is going to be my father, right? My father would be my primary example of a man, and my dad was quite present, and he was very loving, and he was there, and he gave me so many things that were so very positive about communication and care and love and hard work and like the like he was a great father. He is a great father. He
Yeah.
lives on my property like right over there. Um, but there was also things that he didn't show me an example of. He didn't show me an example of follow through on an idea, like how to have an idea and then pursue that fully. He didn't show me an example of how to, you know, stay with a woman. My father had my mom was his second wife, and and then he's had another wife since. So he's had three wives, and he's had many relationships throughout my life. So
Yeah.
that kind of fortitude he didn't show me, and we can't ask for people for perfection, but there was a lot I didn't get from him. So I had to seek those types of things from other men, but I had a great foundation. And I think if I were to say that there's one thing that fathers could do for their children, it's to love them unconditionally and express that often. Because with that core of like, I know I'm loved, like, because I know I'm loved. Like, you can make fun of me,
Yeah.
I can lose all the money in the world, I can lose status, I can lose position, I can hurt myself, I can be sick, but at the
Yeah.
very core, like, I can have times where I don't feel as good. At the very core, if I know I'm loved, and specifically by the things that brought me into this world, my mom and my dad, I can always pick myself up and go. I can always figure it out. I can always be like, you know what? Yeah, this all sucks, but let me figure it out. So I think he did that very well. My mother also did that very well. But in terms of examples, my father was there, and then I've had different mentors over the years who've showed me different things.
Yeah. Incredible. I mean, let's use this moment to like appreciate all the men, fathers, mentors we've had in our life who have constantly been good role models that helps us build more intentional lives. no matter what fate
Yeah.
is. And speaking on this aspect of being shown love and like support, there's also the aspect of like discipline. I would
Hmm.
like to think that one of the things that contributes to more or less the crisis we have among young people today is a lack of discipline. And personally, where I'm from, like I don't know, it's an African thing, right? The father is the disciplined one. Like when you do something, I get like I know it's something that's banned in the world, but there's still some of discipline of like the rod, like the belt. You will see these African mothers with their slippers, but definitely it's just a form of discipline. Now it doesn't have to be
Right.
like physical hitting of the child. How do you approach discipline and still maintain that support and love for your kids? Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. I think discipline is an interesting subject,
Hmm.
especially in the modern world where we're starting to get deeper understandings of, you know, what happens on the long-term outcome of different types of discipline, right?
Yeah.
And you have more of an old school world, which is you do as I say, no matter what, regardless of
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
And if you don't, there's going to be physical punishments and there's going to be loss of privilege, right? And that old corporal punishment, like I think the father needs to be the figure who is like, hey, if you step out of line far enough, I will put you back in line. That
Yeah.
will be necessary. I actually don't think there's many cases that the that physical discipline is required. But I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson's statement around this. He's like,
Mm.
the goal is to use the least force necessary, right? So you want to use the least amount of force, but that could keep going further. And here's what I would say is that I have 4 sons, and each son in each scenario is going to require a different level of force. Now, I think a lot of fathers don't think about using less force and then graduating it into more force. I think most fathers have one tool and they go, I'm going straight to this really aggressive discipline. And I'm like, you had 5 other steps you could have used before you needed to go there. So why did you do that? And I don't, and that part, it, to me, is part of intentional fatherhood. So like, even take culturally, like where you're at, where the man kind of can discipline with the belt and do the thing. It's like, was there a warning? Was there a verbal thing? Was there a sit down and hey, look him in the eye? Was there a next
Yeah.
thing and then was there the belt? Or was it just like did thing belt? It's like, dude, like
Yeah.
there's other steps in the way because I like I don't need my kids to just I don't want, and here's what the bigger picture is for me.
Yeah.
Discipline, and I wrote this down the other day because it was important to me.
Yeah.
Discipline is not about punishing the moment. You're not, the goal is to not punish for the moment. Discipline is about creating a good functioning adult. So when you're looking at the context, it's like, what about the bigger picture is this moment not working? So your older brother hits the younger brother, right? And I go, I don't want him to be disciplined because he hit his brother here. I need him to understand that the imbalance of power between a larger man, him, and a smaller man is not one where you can abuse that through physical action, right? I can't abuse that power structure. So the thing that I need him to learn is that that is an inappropriate use of power. You can't do that to a weaker individual. That's not how a good human being behaves. So I don't just discipline the moment and be like, I can't believe you hit your brother and blah blah blah. It's like, what's the bigger takeaway? And how can I get you to see the bigger takeaway? It's the same thing of like if the kid spills their food on the ground. I don't want to discipline the food spill. I want to be like, hey, weren't careful enough. How can we be more careful so that this kind of stuff happens in the future? It's not about the food falling. It's about the lack of being careful. So like I think a lot of kids, all they remember is being disciplined for the thing. Ooh, I can't do this, or I can't speak back to dad, or I can't. It's like, well, why can't I speak back to dad? Like I think there are times and places where I want them speaking back to me. I want you fighting power. If I'm saying something stupid, I want you to be like, I don't understand that. Explain it to me. Like it's how you speak back, not what the fact that it happened. So like I want you to challenge my authority and then I'm going to be like, here's why. And if I don't have a good reason, then I shouldn't be doing the thing, like so
That's interesting. You should bring that up. Why is that dynamics important that your child should be able to like raise concerns or questions back at you? Because I don't know. It's different where I come from because you're
Yeah.
not supposed to talk back to your father, right? How dare you talk back to your father? Like he would discipline your ass big time. But you're supposed to show it's a form like of respect. Like no matter what it is, you say yes. Like you really more or less correct your parents in any form. Like who are you as a child to do that? But you've
Right.
understood that it's important to see things differently. So I'm just trying to for you to like give some advice to people who might still have that mindset or notion. Because as you're trying to train young people who predominantly be listening to this, why is important as they transition into those of being fathers tomorrow or mothers tomorrow, they have these dynamics created and like upset what we sort of learned from our parents in a way.
Okay. Well, let's take it out of the realm of fatherhood and parenthood and into the
Okay.
realm of leadership, right?
Yeah.
If you think back to the worst bosses that you've had, or the worst leaders that you've had, or the worst organizations that you work for, they're the ones where when something's happening and the person says to do it, they provide no explanation as to why. And when you think it through, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And you're not allowed to be like, hey, why are we doing this? And there could be a really bad outcome afterwards. Now, the environment of questioning things creates a curious human being. And if you don't take it as an attack on um, your idea or who you are, and you're confident with what you're saying, you should never feel you should never feel bad about someone questioning what you're doing. Like that. And I think a lot of us have never actually thought about why we're doing what we're doing. So now we bring it back into the fatherhood realm. If you're
Yeah.
asking your son to do something, you should be willing to do it yourself also, and be like, hey, like, I want you to do the dishes. Well, why don't you do the dishes? Well, I have done the dishes. I also made dinner, and the dishes are your responsibility. It's how you contribute to the rest of the family. And today you're doing the dishes. But I'm not going to be mad that you're like, why'd you ask me to do the dishes? Like, I like I,
Yeah.
it just, to me, it's very logical. And I do think that there is a certain inherent level of respect. And I think you could ask your son or your child, like, hey, I need you to ask me that in a kinder way, or I need you to ask me that in a more respectful way. Like, hey, you can't say I don't want to do the dishes. You can't do that. Like, that's unacceptable. You can say, why do I need to do the dishes right now? I'm curious because it feels like we still have some more dishes back at the table, and I wanted to wait till all of them were done. And I can be like, oh, that's a good reason. I'll also allow you to wait for that. So, like, I think it's always nuance, and it's always situation dependent. But I don't want my child to be subservient. I don't want my child to go out there in the world and then whoever's in power just be
Yes,
like, yes, sir, whatever you want, sir.
sir.
Yes,
Yes.
sir. It's like, no. Like, I want my kid to go out and have like internal power to be like,
Yeah.
I see what you're saying, but I'm wondering, why don't we do this? I think we'll make more money if we do this. I think we'll have more success if we do this. And I think
Yeah.
we'll actually avoid all these problems. And let that be the conversation, not the I just say yes to authority. That's a weird one to me. It's like,
Yeah.
who wants that? Nobody wants that. No adult wants that. Like, those are the most, like, the biggest struggle for adults. And like, that's one of the things. You remember earlier you asked about like kids who are struggling. Like,
Yeah.
imagine your whole life you're being told to just shut up and ask no questions. And then all of a sudden you're being like, oh,
Right.
I have all these questions. Who do I ask? It's like, well, you never got told to, like, you have no sense of self because your dad just beat it into you that you needed to be who he told you you were. And it's like, come on, man. Like, we're
Yeah.
doing this to our kids. I don't
Yeah.
know.
That's true.
I'm
That
passionate about it.
I love how you put it. I love how you put it. And even science shows this, right? When you're able to like communicate with kids and carry them along in the process of a decision you made, they are most likely to like yield to it rather than just instructing them and giving them this command and they can't object.
Totally.
Like we need to have that
Totally.
communication behind it. It's so important. And right now,
Totally.
I was just thinking because you mentioned earlier about how you had this no yelling rule because your kids brought them up to you, and you say you mentioned paying them $5 if they see you yelling at them. What did that process like teach you, and how has that been going? Have you
Uh,
had to break that?
no, no. I mean, in that month, I only paid out $15. It's like,
Okay.
I'm not like a big yeller. Like, I
Yeah.
think people, because I posted it, they assumed that I yelled all the time. And I was like, no, not really. But I get really scary when I do yell, and more scary. And even when I like get intense,
Yeah.
Like there's that level of intensity is frightening,
Yeah.
especially for a child. It's frightening for my wife, like, and I never yell at my wife, but I might get frustrated with something and it comes out way more aggressive than I was expecting. And that's something I had to, kind of almost see on film to really recognize, hey, that's not what I was feeling when I said that, but it came out as like aggression. So I think part of what I learned through that was just like there are many other tools other than yelling in between an action that happens and yelling.
Yeah.
And what was happening for me in the $5, what it really helped with was it gave me space to choose another tool. Right. So
Mm.
I would go, a lot of the times we don't even realize that we're yelling. It's like something happens and we immediately go to yelling. Like someone spills something in the car and we're like, ah, what the, and like it just like it happens fast
Yeah.
because there's no space. And we develop a pattern around no space, and
Yeah.
just our response is to go to the yelling. So it gave me space. So I would go, something would happen, and I would go to yell, and then my brain would go $5, and I'd go, and I'd take that 1 second to be like, okay, tell me what
Mm.
happened. Like,
Yeah.
and it was that was what really did help me. And it's helped me a lot since. And I just
Yeah.
did it again during the 1 year anniversary of that, just like in December. So it's helped me a whole bunch. And
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think if nothing else, it just highlights for yourself like that there's tools you could use outside the ones you're currently using, because the
Yeah.
ones you're currently using are probably automatic and they're
Yeah.
not something that you're thinking about. That's it.
True, true, true. I'm thinking of how when you were young, speaking of condition and how some of these things were taught to you and the pattern had just continued. And this whole idea of
Totally.
like pausing for like a moment is almost something that can translate across every area of our life. Like recently, like this whole road rage, there's sometimes some people just drive something really crazy and they just want to piss me off. I would just be like, just pause. Instead of like yelling, it's
Yeah.
like they're not worth it. They're not worth it. So it means like
Yeah.
just the idea of like pausing before like you
Yeah.
respond actually helps like diffuse the moment and not give you
Yeah.
that reactive feeling that you usually have. And then speaking of
Yeah.
communication with like with kids and having conversations, it can be easy for you to like communicate to your kids some of the things we've talked about, right? Okay, do your home chores, do this. But then there are more harder conversations to be had. This often revolves around, say, politics, sex, religion, topics
Yeah.
around this are much more difficult for parents to have a conversation about. In fact, like growing up, you find that many parents like do not have this conversation with their kids, and they're not forced to learn it from outside, and most likely a dangerous source, right? So, how do you handle this type of topics or conversation with your kids?
Yeah. So I think now more than ever, it's your job to have the tough conversations with your kids. Because if you don't, they're going to get that information from a sketchy source. And like there are very many people and platforms looking to influence their ideas on those things. So if you want to be influential there, you need
Yeah.
to be the person to do so. Now,
Mm.
that being said, I would urge you to not put your bullshit into your kids. So if you personally have hangups around sex and sexuality and talking about sex and these things, like it's one of the most beautiful things in the world. Why do you have hangups? You need to work on yourself and your language around that and
Yeah.
your weirdness around that, and you need
Yeah.
to flush that stuff out so that when your kid says, "What's sex?" you say, sex is an awesome thing that adults have. It ends up feeling really good, and it's how babies are made. A penis goes in a vagina, daddy's pee pee, into mom's hoo ha, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
and a baby's made. It's really quite fun, but it's something that adults do, and you'll learn more about it, and you can ask me about it whenever you want down the road.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's not hard. It doesn't need to be contentious. You don't need to be weird about it. And like, I
True.
think that there's a reality, especially with that conversation to young men, like when we start getting testosterone flowing through us, like in those puberty years, like our brains go wild. Like we
Yeah.
start to enter this transitional time that should require us to seek mentorship and seek guidance. And most men find that guidance and mentorship through pornography, which
Yeah.
is like a strong bastardization of sex. And it completely hardwires the brain to seek that. So if we can be better as fathers to guide our kids during those times and be like, look, hey, bud, you're 12. Right now, you might start thinking some interesting things. Like, your friends, like all of a sudden, you're going to have these weird feelings and start thinking about them differently. That's totally okay. Just
Yeah.
understand that good men don't just act upon those things. You've got testosterone flowing through you. It's going to change how you think. That's okay. It's totally normal.
Yeah.
Ask me any questions that you have about it. Like, that's not a hard conversation to have if you're used to talking to your kids and you're not a weirdo about sex. Now,
Absolutely.
the the other things like politics and religion and whatever it might be,
Yeah.
I speak as somebody who is, I would say, apolitical. Like, I
Mm.
participate and I vote, but I don't put my life stock into politics. Like, I don't do. I think it's stupid too, personally, but that, like, it affects us. But at the same time,
Yeah.
it's like, I'm going to have my opinions. I'm going to try to do my thing. It's all imperfect. Most of it's bullshit. And then also on the other side of things, like with religion, I was raised spiritual, but I never was in a religion.
Mm-hmm.
My mom is now a devout Catholic, and my father is just like has a belief in God.
Yeah.
I myself don't subscribe to anything specifically, but
Okay.
am very open to many things being the truth, and open to being shown the truth. I don't have that faith yet, so I can speak to religion in a very open and honest way. Hey, here's what Nana believes. This is Jesus, this is all the things. Here's what Buddhism is. Here's, like, I almost like a world religions class, because I'm not tied to any one thing.
Yeah.
And I think if you are, I think, say you're Catholic and you really want your kids to be Catholic, I think you actually do more of a disservice to them by saying you need to be Catholic. These are the things, blah, blah, blah. I think you should say, Mom and Dad are Catholic. Here's why. Here's what we believe. There are other religions out there. We believe this, though, because of these reasons.
Yeah.
And being more open minded, because what's more powerful? Someone who believes in something because you told them they had to, or someone who finds that belief and connects to it on a deeper level? Same thing with politics. Like,
True.
I say, here's where I vote, and here's why. But there are people who believe on the other sides. And I don't think kids should have much of an opinion about politics. I think it's like they should be throwing sticks and stuff, like, they
Yeah.
shouldn't be thinking about, like, who the president is, other than, oh, I heard this guy's an idiot. It's like, yeah, many people think he's an idiot.
Yeah,
I don't know.
absolutely,
I,
absolutely. No, I so completely agree with you. And this was something my dad really taught in me. Like this hard conversation, like really early on in life, he would have these
yeah,
open conversations. Like he was like, "Man, like you're my best friend. Like feel free to talk to me about all of this." And despite how busy he was, like he's a doctor, he'll be performing surgery, like, but yet he always made it a priority to be present in our life, ask us about our day. Like I really appreciate him importantly. And
yeah,
speaking of this, right, because I'm a Christian, it was not so like because we are in this religion, you have to belong to this religion. There was a period of like studying the Bible to understand, okay, why is it that we believe what we believe, just like you pointed out, and going through these for like years until I got to the point whereby I could think about it for myself, compare it with other worldviews. I was not like, this actually makes sense, and
yeah,
I followed it. And it's like even now that I'm adult, I'm constantly like thinking, but still yet it just makes sense. So for me, like the Bible is just that thing, right? Just going through it, like you can't find out that one of the most important laws that was ingrained in us really early on talks in Ephesians that talks about like you should honor your father and your mother, right? Obey your parents. Like these are so important values that should be in kids because it's so important. Like your parents are like your best source to guide you, most especially when they don't
yeah,
conflict with like because their parents who might teach kids like wrong values. Most especially most of all these Gen Z girls I'm seeing
yeah,
today. By the end of the day, they
yeah,
want to they want what's best for you. Earlier, you talked about
yeah,
something I've been waiting to talk to you about, which was technology, right? We've
yeah,
seen the harm that could come from it. Kids could get exposed to like sexual predators really early on. It depends on how accessible their technology is, right? They could get exposed to pornography, like we talked about, right? How do you prevent that? So the question is, right now, what are some rules or guidelines you have around technology and mobile devices that it's helping train your kids to avoid these pitfalls later on in life?
yeah. I mean, for one, I kind of treat them like something that is Well, like anything that doesn't carry, how do I say this? I have a framework for myself that there are things that have less risk, right? And if something is less risky, I can give kids more freedom, right?
Yeah.
So playing outside is less risky than playing online. So playing outside, if the kid wants to play outside, I can be like, cool, dude, whatever you want to do, however long you want to do it, get after it. Playing online, there's far more potential danger. So I have to be closer monitoring, and I have to say there's less time for this to be a potential like something that you can do.
Yeah.
And that goes for things like food. Like if kids are like fruits, vegetables, meat, nuts and seeds, real food, there's far less likelihood. It's very hard to overdo those things. But things that are refined foods and sugars and like fabricated stuff, like those things, there is more danger in giving you too much freedom. So I have to watch those closer, and I don't need to be
Yeah.
weird about it and be like, no, no more, blah blah blah. Like I can just be like, well, you get less access because
Yeah.
there's more potential for risk. And so
Yeah.
I think everything falls on this sliding scale of potential danger. And I think the internet and the phones and devices, there's a genuinely high amount of danger. And so you just have to monitor those things closer. So my personal thing is no kid before the age of 17 needs a smart device of their very own that they can be in their bedroom with all alone.
Yeah.
Like that's not necessary.
Yeah.
Um, they're more than welcome to use it for research and be in the living room looking up something for a school project or doing things like that. On the weekends, my kids Saturday Sunday they get access to they get to play their Switch and they play video games and they play Mario Kart and they on
Yeah.
Saturday Sunday morning they get cartoons in the morning, but there's a limited time frame. It's like you get an hour or two because there's three of them, so they have to trade off. So they get 2 hours where one person's playing at a time of playing video games. Like,
Yeah.
but if it's sunny outside and you come in and you say, "Hey, I want to play video games," I'm like, "No, go outside." Like that's an inappropriate
Absolutely.
use of that time because
Absolutely.
the like you're gonna be better off and better served exploring nature and figuring stuff out and playing make believe and being bored in the long term than you ever would playing video games.
Yeah.
Um,
That's yeah.
so for me, my
Absolutely.
personal boundaries are I don't let my kids have their own devices. I may get my kids if they. I'm also have the luxury of homeschooling, so they stay with me. But if they were to
Yeah.
go off to school or they were to spend long times away from me, I might get them like a flip phone that they could call and text me on, or one of those watches where I can call them and text them on the watch. But free access to devices is a straight up like that's crazy to me. There is no good data coming out saying that kids need devices early. Like
Yeah.
all of it is bad, like unequivocally. I mean, I guess there's a couple studies talking about some hand-eye coordination stuff and some learning stuff, but that doesn't mean I'm fully against technology. I understand its use. If my kids want to learn how to, like there's things like I let them watch YouTube videos on certain times, like about certain things. Like
Yeah.
I'll let them if they want to start learning how to program or something like that.
Yeah.
Like I'm open to these things. They're not quite there yet. They're just really into reading and stuff. And I know I've got younger kids, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna be more cautious with it, not in an aggro weird way, but I'm just gonna be more cautious with it because there's more potential danger than other things like learning to be bored.
Yeah, absolutely. Isn't it interesting how I had saw something like this in the 60s, 70s, parents used to like worry to call their kids inside. And then in this our age, parents are forcing their kids to go out because they're always on their mobile device. And there's just so much harm to it. You talked about dopamine earlier on. It's like this neurotransmitter that just affects how you see things, and it's just so stimulating considering apps like TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, and the likes that are just out for your attention. You think it's free, but you're paying a far heavier price, and that's your attention,
Oh
and that's what they're monetizing at the end of the day.
yeah,
So being able
yeah,
to see that there's a danger to this, right? The attention span of young people today is in a deplorable state, and you can
yeah,
tie it most of the times to like technology use. So like a parent, if you're listening to this, like now would be the time to actually think about your child's phone use and if it's actually doing them more good than harm, because you can just think about the good that could come out from it is more or less enhancing their learning. And like having like a computer in the open place, in the parlor, in the living room, or somewhere can just still do that for you. And having time so that they can
Yeah.
just have this mobile device, I think is so very vital, so very important. Thanks for sharing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Quick
No
question
problem.
I just wanted to ask, yeah? On kids.
Mm-hmm.
You have 4 kids now, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What's your view on competition, right? Should boys be taught to compete? Are there competition that exists among them? Because this was something growing up that usually happened. They would always compare you. Look at this guy, or look at your brother. Like there's always somehow this competition around it. Like how do you go about navigating that?
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be taught. I think
Okay.
competition happens quite naturally just as a
Yeah.
result of like being with a bunch of other boys, and like there's everything has like a win-loss sort of deal to it. Like
Yeah.
I think competition is totally fine. I think competition at the expense of other people, especially like power dynamics, like
Yeah.
the older brother to the younger brother, like I think a lot of it is what we model. Like my wife and I are both competitive athletes.
Yeah.
I compete still. Like we met competing professionally in CrossFit. So, we don't. I'm very competitive. I love competing, and I find so much joy in competing. And I actually don't find much joy in winning. Like winning's great, but it's like the act of competing is
Yeah.
what's joyous to me. It's the playing of the game.
Yeah.
So I think by modeling that, they see what it looks like. Like I play competitive beach volleyball now, like as my now sport. I did CrossFit for years, but now it's competitive beach volleyball, and I'm not good. Like I'm okay, but I'm like not great. So I lose all the time. And how they see me lose is like I go out there, I try really hard, I almost win, and I lose, and it's like, well, I lost. It's all good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and the thing is, like, I want them to have fun playing. I want them to go out there and like when they
Absolutely.
play, when they take it. So like I think you don't need to force that into a kid, that competition. And some kids are naturally a little bit more competitive and some kids are a little bit less competitive. And I think that they shouldn't hang their identity on winning and losing. I think that's a mistake, but I think they should enjoy competing and they should enjoy playing. And the only way for them to enjoy those things is for them to do it and do it more and get the natural dopamine hits that happen when you're playing sport and you win some and you lose some and you do everything in between. So
Yeah.
supporting those, I think, is the best way to help with competition, but at the same time recognize that there is a sense that you're going to lose a lot.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's all about the fun in the
Yeah.
process, because that's what really
Yeah.
matters. It's what creates the memories. It's what gives those good feel hormones out there. Amazing.
But I
Yeah.
also think that they need to try hard. Like I am not a fan of
Mm,
going out and not trying hard. So like
okay.
yes, fun, but you have fun by giving it your all. You have fun by trying. Like if you don't try, you let everyone else down, you let yourself down because like you could have had more
Mm,
fun if you didn't try, if you tried. So I think and that's what we have to model in our own things that we do. When I'm working and splitting wood, I try really hard. When I'm playing my sport, I try really hard. When I'm working, I
yeah.
try really hard. And it's like that act of trying really hard. That's the thing that ends up being rewarding and fun. So I don't I have I struggle with kids who don't try hard. So finding what motivates each kid and promoting that, like that I think is the type of competition that I'm into. Trying really hard regardless of outcome.
Yeah, a healthy competition. Love that.
Yeah.
Love that. A lot of young men listening to this podcast aren't fathers yet, right? I'm one,
Mm-hmm.
but it will be one day, right? You're going to be. And part of the journey of doing that is more or less choosing the right partner. You mentioned your wife earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it so important to choose the right mother for your kids?
Yeah. Um I mean, a good woman will bring the most out of you, and I think that that's the real thing, right?
Hmm.
um the the When I think about who I was when I met my wife, I don't understand what she was doing. Like that, I'm like, what were you thinking getting together with me? Like you were
Yeah.
so incredible and
Yeah.
already so well put together. What was why'd you choose me? And I think what even in the moment when it happened, what that forced me to do was to be the kind of man who could live up to her expectations, and in such a healthy way. Like she was such a rock in those things. So by choosing a good woman and by being with a good woman, they bring out the best version of you, and they make it so you can work through things that are really difficult, whether it be conflict, or whether it be
Yeah.
leadership, or whether it be whatever. Like they I think the partner that you choose brings out the best version of you. You're not coming to the relationship being like, I've got it all, now you just match this. It's like, dude, you're going to have so much change and so much growth and so many things happen in between. So I think the importance of that cannot be understated.
Yeah.
And I think a foundation to all of that is communication. If you
Yeah.
communicate poorly and you're not good at it, and you need to be right all the time, and she needs to be right all the time, or she's always wrong and she just shuts down, and like you don't have a back and forth and an open, honest relationship, then it's just, that's the foundation. Like if you don't have that communication, you're
Yeah.
you need to either build it, or you need to either separate. Like that like the quietness and the I'm gonna say one thing and do another, and the distrust and the
Yeah.
honesty, like that's not a world to bring kids up in.
Absolutely. I love how you phrased it. They bring out the best in you. And I'm curious, when we are looking to find out who's going to bring the best in us, right? What should we be looking for beyond just the love and attraction to actually make sure that strong parenting team is there?
Yeah, I mean, I think somebody who has a similar value structure, so they have at the core level similar
Yeah.
values to you, but also has the strength to speak up, like the
Yeah.
strength to talk to you and be open and honest with you. I guess the number one thing is honesty. I think honesty on all levels, honest with yourself, honest with each other, honest with these other things. I think that is the thing that I'll look for in any human that I really want to spend any time with, is honesty. And if I'm looking to live in congruence with myself as a man, it's honesty as well. I think that is like the undertone of good people, is honesty. And I think anybody who's honest, who has a similar value structure to you, I genuinely think you can make it work. Um, Especially if you want to, and understand that love is not it is not those first 2 years. Those first 2 years are honeymoon. Those first 2 years are like, we're gonna have sex 3 times a day and it's gonna be amazing, and I'm just passionately engaged with, and I'm ignoring all of your flaws. The honesty is the one that I would look for, and the strength to speak up with that is where I would go.
That was beautifully well said. Got me thinking a lot right now. So, as I'm thinking towards the time that I want to get married, there are these important qualities I should not be looking for. Thanks so much for pointing that out. You know,
Of course.
this has been a very insightful conversation. I'm sure that many people, whether they are fathers now, whether they are future fathers, or just young men, thinking about the kind of people they want to be, there's a lot to take away from this. And one question I'm going to ask you now is, throughout your journey of being an intentional father, what's one thing you want everybody listening to walk away with today?
What is one thing I want them to walk away with? I mean, we can tie it back to that last thing. I think if you start to examine your relationship with yourself and how honest you really are,
Yeah.
um, I think that is the single greatest level of peace that you will get, is by being more and more and more honest with yourself and the world around you. And I think honesty, a lot of people think, is they just don't lie. It's like, yeah, not lying to other people is a good start, but also not lying by omission. Basically, oh,
Hmm.
I didn't tell that person because I was scared to tell them, or I was, like actually telling the truth when you don't need to present it, but you can. And then simultaneously, in the last little layer of that, and one of arguably the most important, is not lying to yourself. So like if you're sitting there and you're being like, I could eat healthier. I just right now I'm going through a thing, or I could like soon I'll be training, or I didn't actually put my all effort into that, or whatever it is. Like these little bullshit things. I could stop drinking whenever I want. Like those
Yeah.
are little lies you tell yourself, and we can't do that. Like the more you lie to yourself, the more you lie to others, like the harder it is to be okay as a man and a human. And I think that if I had to leave anyone with anything, it's like start looking at yourself. Are you honest in all areas? It's going to be very uncomfortable for some of us to examine that and realize, oh, shucks, I am not honest and I need to start telling the truth, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. And the biggest person you can lie to is yourself. So being honest, do
Ooh,
the
worst.
reflections you talked about. It's so important to just find time to like reflect and see these areas where you could make improvements on. I'm doing a closing, culture on this podcast whereby I ask my guests to think of one question they wish I had asked them during our conversation. So I was asking that, what would it be? One question you wish I had asked you, one topic you wish we had talked about. What would it be?
One topic we wished we would have talked about.
Yeah, you wish to have.
I mean, I don't know how you would have asked me, but I have a fascinating love of a concept called anti-fragility. Anti-fragility is this concept around, organic organisms and a lot of biological systems are by design anti-fragile. They're not resilient. So resilient is you bounce back to the same level, right? You have something happen and you bounce back. And anti-fragile is actually what human beings are, which is where when something happens to them, so stress happens, we actually can go beyond that. We don't just bounce back. When we heal from that, we are actually better. I mean, it's the basic concept around physical training. When you lift weights, you expose yourself to stress, and that stress breaks you down and you get injured temporarily. But when you heal back stronger and you're better because of what you did, because you put
Yeah.
yourself under that stress. So that concept of anti-fragility, I think, applies to all areas of fatherhood and all areas of life, where it's like, whether it be emotional stress or work stress or whatever it is, if we can give ourselves time to step back and think and heal, like and put into context what happened, we're actually better than we previously were. So not seeing stress as a necessarily inherently negative thing, but seeing it as something that forces growth in a way that you have to have. So I
Absolutely.
would have loved to have digged into that, but that's I think, but I don't know how you would have gone there.
I think you've just given us a very good insight or concept around that. And if you could just share one thing you want people to know about this, in addition to what you've just said, what would it be?
Uh, the fact that through reflection and space, you can take anything that has been painful or stressful and turn it into an asset. Um, with enough time and enough rest and enough care, you can be better than you previously were because you experienced it, not in spite of your experience.
That's a beautiful mindset to have because if we can look at all the challenges and struggles and more or less stepping stones to make us stronger, to even face more adversities in the future in our lives, it just all makes us a better individual in the long run. So I really appreciate you
Yeah,
like bringing that out. Thank you so much. So
of
the
course.
final question would be, what are you looking forward to? And something I always wanted to ask you, like, what's your hope for the Fathers Guild and your journey? Because now it's gone more than just documenting your lifestyle. There's a whole movement
Yeah,
around it. So what's your hope for
yeah.
it?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would love to help more fathers on like a personal level, create a space that fathers can come in and be an intentional. I would love to turn this into some sort of a way that I could also support my family, some sort of a business around this, whether it be
Yeah,
providing mentorship or whether it be I have 5 acres in the mountains of California, having people out here and doing men's
yeah,
retreats. Like I'd love to do that, but I need to get the confidence and feel like I have something to offer. Like I can talk all day, but I want someone who like who walks away from an interaction with me to be like, oh, that was super worth it. Like not only just my time, but my like my finance, like to pay for that. I wish I could do it all for free, but I can't sacrifice my life in that way. I need to provide for my family. So I think my vision for it is to somehow turn it into something that simultaneously helps men, but I can also earn money from. So where I can put more time and effort into it.
yeah, absolutely. I think you're on your way to doing that. The growth we talked about earlier in this page that you created, it was exponential in such a short amount of time. That tells you something.
Yeah.
Like there's a need for people to have a space and conversations around this. So it's more or less just, putting a poll on your social media like, would you guys pay for something like this? And let them be the feedback, because I'm sure that they absolutely would pay and would love this. And you give so many insight. Like, look at some of the things we've talked about on this conversation. Like, Pat, like, you're such an inspiration. And I really want to say, like, thank you so much for doing this and keep inspiring
Of
young
course.
men and older men to be better intentional fathers and raising young boys and
Yeah.
girls generally who become amazing individuals in the future. It's been a pleasure, Pat. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate that.
And guys, that's a wrap for this episode of the Intentional Minds. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. I think this conversation has truly been impactful. There are a few lessons that stood out to me. One is the fact that discipline isn't just about the moment. When you're disciplining your kid, it's important to think long term, make them understand why those decisions were made. It makes them integrate into their memory and make them avoid repeating it again. Second, it's the role of social media in parenting. We need to use it as a force for good, and we need to maintain control over what your kids are exposed to. Third is the importance of having open conversations. There needs to be an intentional creation of the atmosphere where your kids feel safe to talk to you without hesitation. I think finally, it's never too early to start thinking about the kind of father or the kind of role model you want to be. Growth is an ongoing journey, it's not a one time thing. And so, these insights have really made me reflect, and I hope they resonate with you. Until next time, stay intentional.